What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. So I thought I would go ahead and continue with this list of the greatest small forwards. Go ahead and update it. The request was to do the top five, but I thought I would go ahead and expand it to the top 10 greatest small forwards in history, and at least in my opinion. You don't have to agree with my order. Please tell me what your order is anyway in the comments section. Now, just do a brief recap. At number 10, I had Big Game James. At number 9, I had Dominique Wilkins. And at number 8, I have Scottie Pippen. All right, of course, Scottie Pippen played 17 years in the NBA from 1987 to 2004, and he's most closely associated with the Chicago Bulls, a franchise in which he won 6 NBA championships during the 1990s. Now, Scottie Pippen has sort of one of the weirdest reputations. There are times when, he is perhaps grossly underrated. And then there are times when he is probably overrated. But all in all, though, Scottie Pippen is definitely a Hall of Famer. He's the most famous Robin, of course, playing Robin to Michael Jordan's Batman, but one hell of a Robin he was. And without Robin, Batman, Michael would have never won any of those championships. He was born in Hamburg, Arkansas in 1965 to Ethel and Preston Pippen. He has 11 siblings. His mother was 6 feet tall, and his father was 6'1". All the children were tall, with Scottie Pippen being the tallest. His father worked in the paper mill until suffering from a stroke that paralyzed his right side, preventing him from walking and affecting his speech. Pippen attended Hamburg High School. Playing point guard, he led his team to the state playoffs and earned all conference honors as a senior, but was not offered any college scholarship. Pippen began his college playing career at the University of Central Arkansas after being discovered by the school's head basketball coach, Don Dyer, as a walk-in. If I remember correctly, Scottie Pippen started off as a janitor working there. And then through tryouts, they saw the potential and how great he was. And I think what helped him was he had a growth spurt. If I remember correctly, I might have my timeline a little bit messed up here, but I think Scottie was like 6'1" when he was a janitor. But then I think he had this growth spurt where he grew like from 6'1" to 6'5". And then that, of course, really elevated his game. And, he became a semi-star, at least locally. Scottie did not receive much media coverage overall because Central Arkansas played in the NAIA, while the media focused, of course, on the more prestigious NCAA, I'm talking about NAACP, NCAA. Actually, I had my growth spurt a little bit off. I was correct. Scottie stood only 6'1" when he graduated from high school, but experienced a growth spurt while at Central Arkansas grew to 6'8". Scottie is really more like 6'7". So, as a senior, his per game averages of 23.6 points, 10 rebounds, 4.3 assists, and nearly 60% field goal shooting earned him consensus NAIA All-American honors in 1987 and made him a dominant player in the Arkansas Intercollegiate Conference, drawing the attention of NBA scouts. So, during the 1987 NBA draft, Scottie Pippen was initially picked by the Sonics. But there was a trade by the Bulls where the Bulls picked Odin Polynice was traded to the Sonics, along with future first draft picks for Scottie Pippen. And Pippen became one of the Bulls' young dynamic players, the other one being Horace Grant. And ultimately what happened is Horace Grant, being an up-and-coming player, made Charles Oakley expendable, or at least he would be eventually. Charles Oakley was a rugged rebounder and defender, but he wasn't much of a scorer, whereas Horace Grant was a rebounder, not quite as big, maybe a tad bit less effective as a rebounder, but still a rebounder. But the upside was that Horace could score. And ultimately that made Charles Oakley expendable in June, and I think it was June 27th, 1988. He was traded to the New York Knicks for Bill Cartwright. Scottie Pippen, he didn't come out guns blazing. He didn't come into the league averaging 18 or 20 or anything like that. His rookie year, as a matter of fact, I believe there were some questions about whether or not the Bulls made a mistake acquiring him, because I believe he only averaged 7 points a game his rookie year. And as a matter of fact, I believe after his rookie year, he had to have back surgery, which is always an ominous sign for a young player. But Scottie Pippen did develop and became a solid player. In particular, he had potential in the defensive end. And by the 89-90 season, Scottie Pippen had become an all-star. And he was a versatile player. He was a guy that could facilitate, defend, score, and rebound. And you started hearing throughout the 1990s that he was the best all-around player in the league. That was a term that you often heard about Scottie. He wasn't the best player. That was either Michael Jordan or Hakeem Olajuwon, depending if Mike was out of the league. But Scottie was this guy that could do it all. He wasn't the best at any one thing, but he could do so many different things out there on the court. And there was a stretch between like 1991 and 1996 where Scottie was usually a top 5 to 10 MVP candidate. I think the closest he got to winning that award was 1993-94. I think he was third in MVP voting behind Olajuwon and Robinson, if I'm not mistaken. During the 1990 playoffs against the Pistons, Scottie had a big setback in that game. He was not having, if I remember correctly, not a great series anyway, but Game 7 was one of the low points, if not the low point of his career. Yet that was the migraine game where when Michael Jordan needed help from his teammates, Scottie Pippen was not there. Scottie missed 9 out of 10 shots, was totally ineffective, and was just plagued by a migraine headache. And ultimately, Scottie would get his shit together, and the Bulls were winning 3 championships in a row, and Scottie was huge during that stretch. Huge. One of the mistakes Scottie made, though, I think in 1991, is when he signed that long-term contract. It was such a bad contract that the general manager at the time, Jerry Krause, and the owner, Jerry Reinsdorf, warned Scottie Pippen not to sign that long-term contract. But he did it because he wanted financial security. The problem was the NBA market was evolving. Revenues were soaring. What was a good contract in 1987, by 1990, was an obsolete, an outdated one, where you didn't make much money. When Scottie signed that contract in 1991, being that he was I think he signed it before they won the championship. Scottie was a guy that he was an all-star one year, but he didn't have much as far as leverage. All-star one year, 90, so um, he signed his contract for security, but he should have betted on himself because by 1993, if he had signed a 2-year deal, he'd have been a 3-time NBA champion, multiple-time All-Star, considered one of the best players in the NBA, and he could have got big money over a short period of time. But he locked himself into that bad contract to the point where by the 1997-98 season, Scottie was the 122nd lowest paid player, or I guess I should say 122nd highest paid player in the league. And you heard that correctly. The second best player on the championship Bulls was ranked 122nd in salary. When Michael Jordan retired all of a sudden in 1993, the Bulls were his team. He came out and had a great year individually. He averaged 22 points, 8.7 rebounds, 5.6 assists, 2.9 steals, and 0.8 blocks per game. Now, keep in mind, the Bulls only averaged, I believe, 96 points a game that year. So if you expand those numbers to today's league, it would have been like 26 points, 10 rebounds, 7 assists, fucking 3.7 steals, 1.4 blocks. But Pippen shot 49% from the floor, and at the time, a career best 32% from the three-point line. The Bulls were able to take the eventual Eastern Conference champion Knicks to 7 games, but ultimately faltering. The next year, the Bulls did not do very well after the departure of Horace Grant. At one point, the Bulls were under 500. When Michael Jordan returned, the Bulls were 34-31, and ultimately they lost in the second round that year. But the next year, Michael being fully returned, to me, 95-96 was Scottie's last real prime year, in my opinion. As a matter of fact, I've always said this, the best basketball I ever saw Scottie Pippen play was like the first couple of months of the 95-96 season. I mean, all eyes were on Michael Jordan, but the first couple of months of that season, Scottie Pippen was playing unbelievable basketball. And I remember looking back at those numbers before Scottie hurt his back, which led to that deterioration that eventually we saw in his overall play, especially on the offensive end. I remember looking at his numbers, and I think Scottie, like the first couple of months, averaged like 23 points, like 6.5 rebounds, like 6 assists, like over 2 steals, but the shooting percentages were crazy. Like Scottie was shooting like 50% from the floor, 40% from 3, 76% from the foul line. I mean, Scottie was just unbelievable, but then he got hurt, and he never quite regained that form. And over the next couple of years, Scottie began to offensively to fall apart, but he still was an all-star. Then, of course, after the Bulls won their second three-peat, Scottie really began to fall apart. He played with the Houston Rockets during the abbreviated 99 season. I think he only averaged 13 points a game. It was an unmitigated disaster. He played a couple years in Portland. They did make it all the way to the Western Conference Finals. They had a 15-point lead going into the fourth quarter in Game 7 against the Lakers. It would have been a monumental upset. Scottie was specifically brought there for a situation like that where he could have led the team to victory. They needed a leader, a veteran presence, but Scottie failed. And the Lakers came back and won that game and won the series. Afterwards, Scottie became more or less a role player, and I think he played something like 20-something games with the Bulls during the 2003-2004 season or something like that. And and then he ultimately retired after the season. Scottie Pippen was a 6-time NBA champion, a 7-time NBA All-Star. He was a 1994 All-Star Game MVP. 3 times he was All-NBA First Team, twice All-NBA Second Team, 2 times All-NBA Third Team. 8 times he was NBA All-Defensive First Team, twice NBA All-Defensive Second Team. He's the NBA steals leader excuse me, in 1995. His number 33 retired by the Chicago Bulls. He's on the 50th and 75th anniversary teams. And he's considered by many the greatest defensive forward of all time. I think the only one that's really in the conversation for this would probably be John Havlicek. Scottie Pippen, number 8. Tell me if you agree or not.